All right, SkullKing Nation, we are back with another one of our interviews from this Inside Look series going into the NFL Draft and the Combine. And today we have a very special guest from Iowa State, Mr. Ben Bruns, former All-American center from the Iowa State Cyclones. He is now the Sideline Reporter. Ben, thank you for joining us today for this interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here, Ryan. Thanks.
All right, so really there's, two top prospects coming out of Iowa State going into the draft in terms of, with us being a fantasy football website, talking about fantasy. Let's start off with the monster wide receiver, Hakeem Butler, 6'6", 225 pounds, had a phenomenal season, 60 receptions, 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns. He averaged over 22 yards a reception. Give us just a little bit of your thoughts and your observations of Hakeem Butler, especially this last season.
Well, Hakeem has established himself. Let's start with he's a really intelligent player. Graduated from Iowa State in 3.5 years, and to be able to come out already early is a big deal. He's a guy that he can beat you so many different ways. And, we had an outstanding wide receiver who was a senior in last year's class, Alan Lazard, who didn't translate to being a pro on an every down basis. I think eventually Alan will maybe find a bit part somewhere. But a guy like Hakeem, the difference is Hakeem can get his hips open. He can get off of press coverage. He can make himself skinny. He's powerful in gaining separation from DBs. Played against some of the best DBs in the country over the course of his 3-year career at Iowa State. And he has enough top end. I think people will be surprised at what he runs when he gets the chance for a big wide receiver. He will, I think, open some eyes about his speed. He has such long strides that people don't think he is as fast as he is, but able to change his body in the air, huge catch radius. I think he has the opportunity. How he may be seen in terms of where he goes, the kind of team that he goes to play for. He is a legit outside threat as a wide receiver. If he has a weak spot, it's that he had a handful of drops in his career, and typically not on a third down situation. He makes clutch catches, but first, second down, that's an area that the NFL will want to see him improve. And but he can do things that few others in our league, which is a league that has tons of great wide receivers, have the capability to do.
Yeah, I think the one game that really stands out to me is one that I actually was sit down and actually watched on ESPN was the game at Iowa State this year against Oklahoma, and his strength breaking through tackles. I mean, while you could say it was partially poor tackling from Oklahoma, his power getting through some of those tackles from the defensive backs, and then once he got through those tackles, like you said, his deceptive speed, just plain running away from everyone. He does, in the open field, you can actually see he does have very good speed, especially for a guy who's 6'6", 225. I mean, that's a lot to handle, a guy that size who can also move fast. I think the other thing that really stood out to me was his strong hands. You mentioned especially, making the clutch catches on third down and stuff. His hands, especially in traffic, because he's able to use his body so well, he can make he's made some outstanding catches. His highlight film is full of them.
Yeah, he's got a touchdown catch against a little later in the season in a home game where it's a one-handed catch. He's upended somersaulting into the end zone, and the ability to get the ball inside the pylon and hold on to it all the way through, huge impact on the ground, it's just mind-boggling. He can snatch the ball out of the air, in ways that you just don't see anybody else do. He was built specifically for this spot.
Yeah. Another thing, you talked about I remember watching that catch on his highlights. A couple other things that really stood out to me, obviously because of his size, he's able to high point the ball well. He doesn't necessarily need to out jump defenders. However, he can out jump defenders and then reach over defenders to still make the catch. His ability to get up in the air to make the catch, use that frame of his, and then his, I've noticed on some of his film, just his footwork on the sidelines has been pretty impressive to me as well. Just his ability to make sure he gets at least 1 foot in. Now, once he gets up to the NFL, obviously he needs to get 2, but his knowing where his body is at and where his feet are at and able to get, that 1 foot down, very impressive work on the sidelines.
I think you're exactly right, Ryan. And I go back to how heady he is, right? All of those things you just described are emblematic of a player who, mentally is always looking for an edge. He's a hungry player. I suspect that he won't go as high as everybody thinks he probably should, or as many people think he should. Iowa State prospects in the past have typically slid down draft boards. And if that's the case, he could be an absolute steal in somebody's fantasy draft because Hakeem Butler will catch touchdowns in the NFL.
Yeah, like you said, he with his size and everything, he is going to be a weapon for someone. Now it may take a couple years to get there, but definitely he is going to be a lot of fun to watch and see how he grows in the NFL and to see what can come of his career.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Excited about it.
Let's go ahead and move on to the running back David Montgomery. I've seen, I'm in a couple of different draft day chat boards, and I've seen David Montgomery anywhere from listed as like the number 6 or 7 running back to the number 1 running back in this draft. Just how people are viewing their tape and everything. Montgomery's a special player. 5'11", 216. He runs with power. Finished this year, 1,200 yards rushing, 13 touchdowns. Can catch the ball out of the backfield. 22 receptions this year. I think it's 58 catches over the last 2 years. Give us just a couple of thoughts on David's season this last year.
I think David's season, was what many of us thought might happen if the offensive line play wasn't great, and we were hoping for a breakthrough in offensive line play for him. But the reality is, Iowa State's offensive line has been one of the lowest performing run blocking units the last couple of years, and yet they still have a 1,000-yard rusher in David Montgomery 2 straight seasons. And David really, we don't know how good he can be as a pro, especially with a talented offensive line in front of him. He has had to make so many guys miss in minus yardage situations from the snap of the ball that he really can't trust the hole that he's supposed to attack or the scheme that has been deployed in his own look. He has to second guess everything and sort of create on his own. And that I think will take a little bit of time for him to break that habit or build that trust with an offensive unit that is better up front running the football. But the NFL gives you so many reps and so many opportunities for that. I think he has some of the intangibles of a guy like James White in terms of his versatility catching the football. I think he can be a great third down back as well as first and second. He doesn't have game-breaking speed, and so that's a piece that in many cases, the NFL looks at as a limiting factor. But he gets better as the game goes on. He's as gritty of a player as I've ever seen. An absolute fierce competitor. David, in winter drills, David was the one guy that every single time, and Iowa State does a bunch of competitive winter drills where it's one-on-one, whether it's tug of war, or it's a towel wrestling, or it's you're rolling some big drum filled full of water 10 yards and then running, and just super competitive stuff. Whenever anybody got matched up against David, you could just see the look in their eye, because they knew that it was over. He was going to, if he didn't win right away, he was going to wear them out and win. And I think that his work ethic and his grit will shine through, and people will have a really easy time cheering for David Montgomery. And I also think that in the right system, he can be a very productive guy. But he's got a little bit of baggage from having to make all those guys miss right up front early on.
Yeah, you talk about making guys miss. Watching some of his jump cuts, he showed that he doesn't necessarily have that breakaway speed. He has enough to get to the edge. He can be slippery. I saw that he runs with a wide base. And while I'm not saying that he has the same kind of style as a guy like Marshawn Lynch, the way that Marshawn Lynch runs is he runs his feet a little bit farther apart, not so, in line, and it helps him keep that wider base so that he can take some of those hits. And I was seeing a little bit of that in Montgomery's running style, that he seems to keep a little bit, stay lower, keeps a little bit of a wider base, so he keeps his balance a little bit better and is able to bounce off some of those tackles. Just something that I noticed in his running.
That's a great analysis and a really good comparison. David is a absolutely punishing runner, and yet he's got the ability to pirouette and put a hand down and stay up. He constantly throughout his career surprised defenders in how he wasn't down. The entire defensive unit would stop playing at times, and it would be a 3, 4, 5 times a season kind of thing, where everybody's sure he's down and he's not, and the officials about 50-50 would would have him play on, and when he did, it usually meant another big play. He has the ability to take contact in the hole and come out with plus yardage. The last couple of years, by far the most productive running back in the NCAA after contact. And sadly for us, he had a lot of contact, but he can do things that are not, that seem superhuman at times.
Yeah, he definitely he showed a lot in the game tape that I've seen. Not only again the jump cuts, the willing to take on defenders, dropping his shoulder into a linebacker, shows that strength that he has. And at 5'11", 216, he's not a little guy either. And on top of that, you're watching a couple of the plays, especially on the goal line plays, his ability to jump over the line to get into the end zone, showing his not only his strength but also his athleticism to go along with it.
You're right, Ryan. He has a nose for scoring plays. He is athletic, particularly good at making a catch in the open field, and immediately being ready to make and break a play, which I think relates a lot to that same sort of explosiveness out of the being able to score in goal line situations. It's a unique set of skills, and I understand why everybody wonders, because his tape looks so different than others. Most guys who are running for 1,000 yards see a running back going downhill much more than David Montgomery was able to. And you then translate that and imagine what does this look like if he has that chance to be headed downhill and then make a guy miss. There's a handful of games where Iowa State's offensive line really dominated the football game, and in those contests, his production goes way, way up, because now all of a sudden he's making a safety miss in the hole and breaking a huge play. And when he does that, you'd be surprised by how fast he actually looks.
Yeah, it's I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of system that both Hakeem Butler and David Montgomery end up in. Looking at some of the guys like being up here in Seattle and watching the Seahawks for years, seeing the different types of running backs, and I think that David Montgomery, if he's in a style of running scheme like what the Seahawks run, let's be honest, none of their running backs over the last few years have been burners. Mike Davis, Chris Carson, Thomas Rawls. They weren't. They were powerful guys, but they weren't burners. And I think that if Montgomery can end up in a system that has a really solid blocking line, and he can, like you said, maybe work through some of the quote unquote baggage of not having that good line throughout college and trusting what his line can do, I'm really excited to see what he can put together going into the NFL.
Yeah, I think the Chris Carson comparison is a really good one. A guy who has kind of broad hips, but is slippery and versatile. And look at what a difference some blocking in front of him makes, and super productive pro.
All right. Well, Ben, we want to thank you again for giving up some of your time to speak with us about Hakeem and David. Like I've been saying at the end of all these interviews, I am very thankful and appreciative of everyone who's been willing to give us an interview, and it's been really cool for me to be able to talk to people who have, whether they've been, actual players in the game, or, even just been as be able to watch these guys as intimately and as closely as you guys have, and to just kind of be able to gain a little more knowledge on players and the game of football itself. So, Ben, thank you so much for giving us some of your time today.
Well, Ryan, thanks a lot. These are two special kids. They're great people, and they will be accountable members of their ball club, who are also really durable guys, and we can't wait to see what their seasons and future look like. Thank you.
All right, thank you, and hopefully maybe next year we'll get to talk about a couple more players.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right, we'll talk to you later. Hey, SkullKing Nation, thank you for listening to the SkullKing Football Podcast. Did you like this episode? If so, be sure to go to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube to subscribe. Also, please leave us a rating and reviews to let us know how we can better help you rule your leagues.